Good morning, councillors, executives, staff and those listening in on the digital gallery. It is my privilege to declare the ordinary meeting of the 7th of February 2023 open. I'd like to begin with the acknowledgement of country. The Scenic Rim Regional Council acknowledges the traditional country of the Mununjali, the Wandjabara, the Yugrapul peoples of the Scenic Rim. We recognise that the Scenic Rim continues to have connections to cultural, spiritual, environmental and economic importance and respect connection to the country. We pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging, acknowledging the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples play in shaping the future of our region. I would also like to acknowledge and pay respects to all those Defence Force veterans who have passed and those who presently reside within the Scenic Rim. Your loyal service to the defence of this country is what enabled us to all have the life that we have today. Thank you. I'll move on to item 2. I note the approved absence of Mayor Greg Christensen, who is currently on a Council of Mayors South East Queensland sponsored North America business mission for the 2032 Olympic Games, and is currently not able to connect via the internet. Otherwise, I note the full attendance of councillors and executives. I will also note the attendance of the Department appointed Governance Advisor to the meeting. I would also like to acknowledge and thank our guests in the public gallery for taking an active interest in council matters. Moving on to item 3, there are no apologies. Move on to...
We don't have a pastor, so someone else would like to do the prayer.
Okay, I've just been advised the call has dropped out for our pastor. Would anyone like to give prayers this morning? Councillor McGuinness, thank you.
Really appreciate the notice, Acting Chair. Can we just bow our heads for a brief moment, please? And I say this, could I just say before I start, we had a good friend got killed yesterday, and it upset a lot of us around the place. So we, Heavenly Father, we give thanks for being able to attend this meeting here today and be able to express our opinions in the way that we believe in, and to make it better for the Scenic Rim residents. So we thank you for the great place that we live in, and that we continue to live and nurture this part of our beautiful country. We give thanks in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor McGuinness. We'll now turn to item 5 and ask the CEO if he has received any conflicts of interest for this meeting.
Sorry, no, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Acting Mayor.
Thank you. Now move to item 6. I have no announcements or mayoral minutes. Item 7, we have received no deputations or petitions. Move on to item 8, confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. We have a recommendation before us. Councillors, you've had time to review the previous minutes. Are there any questions on the previous minutes?
Yes, Mr. Acting Mayor. Just to refer to item 9.1 on page 7 of the minutes, and I'd like to move a motion that paragraph 2 in item 9.1 be removed for confidentiality reasons.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Would it be possible to have someone else move the minutes and then propose the adjustment after the minutes have been moved?
Okay. Yes, correct.
Thank you.
So move it that the minutes.
If you could have someone move.
Yeah, move that the minutes of the previous meeting, is it up on the screen? Meeting held on 24th of January 2023 be adopted. Councillor Chalk. Seconder. Councillor West.
Mr. Acting Chair, could I advise just why the procedure is going to be that we adopt the minutes first and then change them?
We're going to move an amendment.
Yeah, okay. All right. No, I just, had some concerns about that, but anyway, let that go for the moment.
Councillor Chalk, you wish to speak on the motion? Councillor West?
No, thank you.
Speaker against?
Mr. Mayor, I speak against moving the minutes as they are because I'll be proposing an amendment to correct the record.
Can you move your give us your amendment?
Look, I propose an amendment that the second paragraph in item 9.1 on page 7 of the minutes be deleted.
Just waiting for it to be up on the screen. Councillor Chalk, as the mover of the motion, are you happy? Councillor West?
Yes.
So I now put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Okay, move on to item 9. Do we have any business arising from the previous minutes? No, we did, because the mover and the seconder were all in agreement with the amendment, so we didn't need to move a separate motion. So now on to item 9, business arising. Any business arising from the previous minutes? None. Now move on to item 10, the consideration of business for the meeting. I invite the CEO to introduce item 10.1.
Sorry about that. Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, there is a recommendation there that Council consider Councillor Swanborough's notice of motion in relation to the nomination of Hartley Road, Tambourine Mountain to the Roads and Transport Alliance for consideration of funding.
Thank you. Councillor Swanborough, would you like to talk?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move
That's
the motion.
Acting Mayor.
Acting Mayor, I'd like to move the motion. The motion is that Council nominate Hartley Road, Tambourine Mountain to the Roads and Transport Alliance for consideration of funding as a local road of regional significance. This road is considered not fit for purpose and is likely one of the highest traffic local roads in the Scenic Rim, as it is an arterial link servicing tourists and locals between the major northwest arterial roads in the highest population centre. Traffic, including buses, is generated to the high school of up to 1,100 students. 3 wineries, the Cedar Creek Wines, Mason Wines and the Cauldron Distillery. The SES, fire and ambulance rear entrances, a helipad, a landscape supply business. Airbnbs, 2 water utilities involving substantial truck movements, and the Cedar Creek glowworm caves, catering on average to 250,000 visitors per year. Post-COVID and nomination as Queensland's top tourism town has increased visitation and the usage of this road.
So are you going to move that motion? Which motion are you going to move?
So I'd like to add to that motion.
Will this? No, this a separate motion.
It's a separate motion, yes. my separate motion is that the notice of motion as proposed be received and considered at item 10.5 of this agenda.
Seconder for the motion. Seconded by Councillor West. Like to speak on your motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I put this notice of motion up. I was unaware of what was going to be on the agenda for this particular meeting. I see that there is a recommendation from officers that a process be followed which would actually give effect to this notice of motion. So I'm happy for that to be dealt with at item 10.5.
Thank you. Any speaking against the motion?
Chair, if I
Councillor Enright.
Yep, thank you, Acting Mayor. In speaking against the motion, I would like to understand what the normal process is for identifying and prioritising local transport investment, local transport infrastructure investment decisions.
Well, okay. We're debating at the moment, and this is going to go into 10.5, so his motion is that we consider this in 10.5, and we'll be having those answers in 10.5 if you're happy. The motion is only to receive it and consider it in item 10.5. It's not to send it to the Alliance. So the motion is the one at the bottom, not the notice of motion.
Okay, thank you. I'll take that information.
Anyone speak for the motion?
Oh, look, I would like to just to mention that, thank you, Councillor Sombra, the second part of the motion is really appropriate because there was a little bit concern about just nominating Hartley Road because that's not really part of the process. And I guess, as Councillor Sombra mentioned, we have item, whichever it is, later, item 10.5, which really goes into the process of how these roads are assessed, because it's quite a bit of an assessment process to go forward first before they're put on that register. So I'm happy to support the motion as it is.
Anyone speaking against the motion? Like to close, Councillor Swanborough?
Yes, thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. Mr Mayor, look, I'm aware of the process that does occur here. This notice of motion isn't in conflict with the process. It's merely saying, this is what is the outcome that I'd like to achieve. Whatever that process is, it's a process, and I'm not concerned about, the process. I'm really concerned about the outcome. So, yeah, let's go through the process, and it's my hope that we can get to the outcome as proposed.
Thank you. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Move on to item 10.2. Ms. CEO. Oh, just so we can clarify, if you can address me as the chair, that way we won't mix up Mr. Mayor, which I'm not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll hand over to the General Manager.
Thank you. Chair, CEO, Executive, Councillors, Gallery and those listening online. 10.2 today is the item related to the Scenic Rim Arts Reference Group Terms of Reference Update for 2022. I acknowledge that Councillor Enright is the Chair of the Regional Arts Reference Group here for the Scenic Rim. I have officers in the room with me today, Linda Phillips, the Principal Specialist of Cultural Services, and the Acting Manager of Customer, Community and Culture, Margie Jackson. Linda is going to give us a very brief overview of the report because we've taken it as read, but particularly to call out the suggested changes to the Arts Reference Group, the review that's been undertaken for the terms of reference for that group, and some changes that we're proposing to put in place for the Regional Arts Development Fund moving forward from the next financial year. Thanks, Linda.
Good morning. This report provides an updated terms of reference for the Scenic Rim Arts Reference Group. The current terms of reference were developed in 2016, and these recommended updates are part of a regular review process. In addition, there have been a lot of formatting changes to bring this document in line with other similar council documents. There are 4 specific changes that have been made addressing flagging attendance of community members at ARG meetings. These are: membership has been reduced from 9 to 7 members, plus the chair with a quorum of 4. In 2023-24, the RADF Big Idea Community Grant will change from 2 to 1 round per year, reducing the meetings from 4 to 2 per year. The new term of office for members will be 3 years. An expression of interest process will be conducted beginning in June this year to fill all community member positions, with existing members welcome to reapply. And I'd like to express our gratitude to both the Chair and all community members. They're an important part of the process, and we're not asking any of them to step down. This is just an opportunity for members that want to continue to express that interest. A membership information pack will be provided to prospective members, and a pool of applicants will be kept to fill any vacancies that arise before the 3-year term ends. And the 4th change is a process has been included under 4.2 for decisions outside a meeting to facilitate timely decisions when a meeting can't be organised. One final amendment has been made under 3.1 structure, with non-voting being added to the chair's position. In practice, this has always been the case, and it's now been added to the terms of reference for clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, you have the report in front of you. Do you have any questions regarding the report? No questions. Thank you. Ask the GM to present the recommendations, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, before you for your consideration today is a relatively long recommendation, so bear with me. Firstly, that 1, Council endorse the updated Scenic Rim Arts Reference Group Terms of Reference 2023. 2, that Council acknowledge the Scenic Rim Arts Reference Group Chair, being an appointed elected member of Council, is a non-voting member of the group. 3, that Council acknowledge the Major Regional Arts Development Fund program Big Idea applications will change from 2 rounds to 1 commencing in 2023-2024 financial year, reducing the number of Scenic Rim Arts Reference Group meetings to 2 per year to assess these grants. 4, that Council acknowledge the Scenic Rim Arts Reference Group will continue to assess the Minor Regional Arts Development Fund Launchpad and Express Lane applications as a rolling program. 5, that Council note the new format of the Scenic Rim Arts Reference Group is proposed to commence in July-August 2023, once an expression of interest process has been conducted and the new group is formed, noting current members are welcome to reapply. And 6, that Council extend its gratitude to all community members who have given of their time and expertise as members of the Scenic Rim Arts Reference Group since its inception, and particularly the current members who have continued to support Council and the region's creative and artistic community.
Thank you. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Enright. Is there any discussion on the Scenic Rim Arts reference, terms of reference? No questions? Okay, seconder. Councillor McGuinness. Councillor Enright, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would. I think it's very timely that the terms of reference be refreshed. As most things, it needs to be reviewed and brought into line with current needs, and I think this revised terms of reference does satisfy that. Acknowledge some of the changes that have been outlined, particularly reducing the meetings from 4 to 2. That doesn't mean that the opportunities for funding are reduced. It means, in fact, that the opportunities for larger amounts of funding going toward a particular project may be available, or it enables more applications to be approved at the one time. I think it's important at this stage to recognise the expertise and commitment to our volunteer members of the community who have assisted since the formation of the Arts Reference Group, and particularly in my term of almost 3 years as being chair, it's been a delight to work with the members of our community who are so willing to give of their skills and expertise into assisting our arts and cultural sectors of our community to grow. And I would like to take this opportunity to recognise the 9 current members who are on the Arts Reference Group, in being Elsa Rowley, Brendan Knight, Janine Gibson, Jeremy Ring, Pietro Agnolietto, Shane O'Reilly, Stuart Murray, Susan Rellings and Susan Short. And I'm happy to move this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to speak additionally? Any closing remarks, Councillor Enright?
No, thank you, Chair.
We'll now vote on the motion. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Now move on to item 10.3. Ask the CEO.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll hand to the General Manager.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, CEO. Item 10.3 before you today, councillors, is Infrastructure Charges request to waive charges for a charitable organisation known as Wongaburra Society under MCU 22/025. I have today the Acting Manager of Regional Development, Health and Biodiversity, Joseph, and also just Joseph for this item, so I'll hand over to Joseph. The report is self-explanatory. We've taken it as read, and I've just asked Joseph to call out any highlights that he wishes to share with Council.
Thank you, Deborah, and good morning, Council. So the important points to note out of this report to Council is in relation to the infrastructure charges totalling $66,737.20 at the time of approval. The original approval was for the redevelopment of the site, which included an additional 6 rooms, so that's where that charge has come from. The request made by the applicant is on the basis that they are a not-for-profit charitable organisation and in accordance with Council's adopted charges resolution. Under the resolution, infrastructure charges may be considered for discount upon request, and in such applications should be assessed on a case-by-case basis. In addition to being a not-for-profit, consideration has been given to Wongaburra Society's service as a local aged care provider within the Scenic region, and their continued community support since its official opening in 1970. Given that the approval is primarily a redevelopment of the site, of the existing development with minimal additional demand on infrastructure, trunk infrastructure that is, a full waiver of 100% of infrastructure charges is considered appropriate in this case and is recommended for Council's consideration.
Thank you, councillors. You've read the report. Do you have any questions regarding the report? No questions. Councillor McGuinness.
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to ask Mr. Chair, ask Joseph, is this consistent with other cases, similar cases? And in asking that question, I applaud Wongaburra for the work that they do, and I note in North Street, Harrisville, there was only a 25% waive there and I just wonder what other organisations, and most are non-profit organisations that do it, are we being consistent in this?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, correct. Within the report, it does make reference to a previous consideration of Council. At that time, it was resolved for a 25% reduction in the infrastructure charges. In this instance, we haven't drawn parallels, and we do consider it on a case-by-case basis, but it really does come down to the consideration of the councillors, whether they feel the 100% is warranted. Consideration is made against the policy, which is the charges resolution. In this instance, it doesn't meet the requirement of being on council land, so other considerations have been made in relation to its that it's an ongoing use. It's been in existence for a number of years, and the additional demand is considered quite negligible when you consider the total existing development and what is considered existing use rights.
Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Chair. If I can expand on that previous question, with the aged care facility that has been raised in Harrisville, what was the maximum reduction that applied to on that application?
Thank you, Councillor. So at the time, I wouldn't be able to speak to what the policy position was at that time, but it's an applicant can make a request for up to 100%. In that instance, a waiver of 25% was resolved by council.
And
From recollection, I thought it was up to $50,000.
correct. That's correct. It was capped at $50,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Additional question, supplementary to that, is that was the structure of the aged care facility in Harrisville the same organisational structure as that of Wongaburra?
I would have to take that question on notice. Apologies, Councillor.
CEO, if we can just note down that question on notice. Thank you. Councillor Swanborough.
Thank you. A question on page 38 of the report. It says that under budget financial implications that any waiver of charges will reduce income, which is directed towards trunk infrastructure, which would need to be funded through the general rate base. I wonder if the General Manager of Sustainability might comment what is going to be the impact on general rates, and would it be possible just to reduce the infrastructure charges budget by that amount and not necessarily have to fund it by an increase in rates?
I don't see a reference to an increase in rates. Obviously, the infrastructure charges are contributions towards trunk infrastructure. So any commitments that council will have to provide in terms of funding that trunk infrastructure would have to be balanced by out of the capital expenditure budget. So in reference, it doesn't. There's a balancing of what's able to be funded through the general revenue coming in. A waiver of 60,000 would require, when that infrastructure was required to be built, consideration how to fund that, and the funding of that would come from our general revenue.
Infrastructure, especially trunk infrastructure charging, also comes in from future development, and that's the main source of this. Is it likely that that money may not be spent for many, many years, and it may not even be need to spend if this proposal is not going to generate any extra load on trunk infrastructure?
I couldn't answer that in depth, but obviously council has an obligation to monitor the requirements for trunk infrastructure and any contributions. So council would have to maintain some commitment, but certainly open to Chris in terms of future obligations and what the requirements are for that type of infrastructure.
Yes, thank you for the question. Look, it's very difficult to tell. We're in the process of reviewing our trunk infrastructure requirements. It's certainly a long process. It certainly will take a number of years to get to the final outcome of that, looking at our growth projections and other aspects. I will take that trunk infrastructure requirements for payment don't necessarily meet the full cost of the provision of that trunk infrastructure. Historically, you'll actually see that about anywhere between 20 and 40% of our trunk infrastructure is actually funded through development contributions at this point in time. So, look, it's around understanding that it may mean the delaying or the reprogramming of how a piece of infrastructure is then built. The other opportunity is, if you want to bring that piece of infrastructure forward, is funding it through various means, whether that be through rates or through a loan. It's probably the simplest way I can put it at this point in time, more broadly.
Thank you, Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to bring council members' attention to paragraph 4 of page 37, which quotes at the bottom of that paragraph, while there is minor increase in the number of bedrooms, the actual additional demand on trunk services is minimal.
Thank you for that. Any more questions on the report? GM, if you could present the recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, before you is a recommendation that Council approve the waiver of infrastructure charges for MCU 22/025 by way of donation and via an infrastructure agreement as issued in the infrastructure charge notice to Wongaburra Society dated 15 November 2022, as provided for in section 11.3 of adopted infrastructure charges resolution version number 13, 30 November 2021.
Thank you. Mover for the motion, Councillor Enright. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion. Seconder? Councillor West. Councillor Enright, would you like to speak on your motion?
Thank you, Chair, I would. Wongaburra is unique in that it does not have a large parent company or non-for-profit entity standing behind it. It is a result of a community-led facility that recognised a need and raised sufficient funds from the community to establish the original facility in 1970. Over the past 52 years, Wongaburra has maintained a community-based, non-denominational, not-for-profit organisation with a board consisting of local business people who volunteer considerable time to the strategic direction of this organisation. Wongaburra are a major employee of over 160 local people with capacity to increase to 185. Their annual wage expense is over $10 million. Wongaburra are a major contributor also to our local economy, with $600,000 a year spent in local food purchases and $300,000 into local tradesmen. They are demonstrating an incredible commitment to the future of Beaudesert and wider districts to continue to provide modern facilities to meet the needs of our ageing community. They are worthy of support in providing this wave of infrastructure charges to assist them on this impressive journey.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to speak additionally? Councillor West.
Thank you, Chair. Really just, excuse me, to mention that we know we have an ageing population around the whole region and we are looking for more developments like this. So I do believe with the record that Wongaburra has, it's appropriate that we support them moving forward at this stage.
Any others wishing to speak? Councillor McGuinness.
Thanks, Chair. I will end up agreeing to this, but and I acknowledge what Councillor Enright has said about Wongaburra and its uniqueness, but there are a lot of other, or most other, charitable organisations, whether that be Wesley Mission, Church of Christ. They're often manned by and board of directors in a voluntary way also. So, yeah, while it's unique, yeah, there's not that many that I know of. Yeah, in this same structure here. The others are usually bigger organisations, but they still have a lot of volunteers that help them, and I think we should be consistent, but I'm prepared to go along with the recommendation here.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Councillor Enright, would you wish to close?
No, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. CEO, if you could introduce item 10.4.
Through Mr. Chair, I'll hand over to the General Manager.
Thank you, CEO and Chair. Item 10.4 today is a tourist accommodation safety compliance program that officers are proposing to introduce. In addition to Joseph in the room, I also have the Team Leader of Compliance Services, Mark Duncan. It's a pleasure to present this to Council today for its consideration. And I want to acknowledge the many tourism operators and industry members over the years that have raised this with Council, and particularly during the time when the Scenic Room Tourism and Advisory Group was formed, and then went on to form a subcommittee that in August 2019 presented to us a review of the non-compliant short stay accommodation that they had identified as a group of industry members within the Scenic Rim. This advice has been presented previously to Council and for further consideration, and it was also asked of officers to consider how to work with industry and the community to address these compliance issues. I'd like to ask that the officers to give, we take the report as read, but to draw out any highlights that they'd like to raise with Council today in how this program being proposed will be implemented.
Good morning. The intent of the safety compliance program is to ensure that we have all a level playing field for all tourist accommodation personnel. There's been a sharp increase in tourism within Scenic Rim over the last few years, and we need to ensure that Council addresses all planning and safety requirements. Tourist accommodation may have health and safety shortcomings, and we need to ensure that they're all compliant. Lawful operators will not be affected and should be supported in the program. We will be working through regulatory services as the section that will be conducting this, but it's almost a whole of Council program, because we'll be working very closely with all sections of Council to ensure that it is compliant.
Thank you, Mark. If I could add, through you, Chair, this is not about dobbing people in. This is about raising awareness and educating those that are wishing to transition properties into other uses to come forward and have open discussions with our planning team in concept meetings and with our compliance officers to understand how they do that lawfully and safely. It's also a matter now that, we have a number of properties who, with the changes to the planning scheme, have other abilities for them to transition, and our concern, as was pointed out by Mark, will be dealt with industry, and I want to acknowledge the role that Destination Scenic Room will play with Council in delivering this program of awareness raising, education, and of course ensuring compliance.
Thank you, GM. Any questions around the table regarding the report? Councillor McGuinness.
Yes, if I could ask the GM or our Mark, either one. To me, it's sort of, we're aiming at Airbnbs to a large extent here, and the report that we had a couple of years ago from Destination Scenic Rim, I thought it was, I don't know whether there was anyone there that was from the Airbnb place, but they were, I can understand the report that came there at the time was certainly to look after the B&B operators, and I do acknowledge though that it is a good thing that people make sure their facilities are up to scratch, and especially if they're proving food for their own benefit. But are we also aiming at people who just share a room or rent a room out as well? Do they come into this category too?
Councillor McGinn. Oh, sorry.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. I'll answer the front end of it, and then perhaps Mark can add to it. You are right. In the original discussions that were brought forward by the industry, there was some primarily some concerns about bed and breakfast. Airbnb, though, we should point out, is a brand and is one organisation, and there are multiple brands and platforms that facilitate people wishing to offer up properties for rent. And so that was an initial focus because it was actually bed and breakfast operators that brought the concerns forward to us. Legally operating ones were concerned about ones perhaps not operating as well as they could. And that report also talked about the presentation of those properties and the service standards being offered, and they were very concerned about it undermining the high integrity and brand of the region. So I think from that perspective, we've taken that on board, but when you look at it more broadly, there are other situations where people are leasing properties that aren't necessarily going through a platform such as Airbnb or Stays or whichever. Mark might like to answer the back end of the question as well.
Yes, Councillor McGuinness, we will be targeting shared accommodation. That's predominantly the accommodation that we will be addressing to ensure that they become compliant and licensed. We will also be looking at camping grounds where we've got people who are thinking that they can have 5 or 6, camping areas in their area or close to the river. So we'll be targeting them to make sure that they are also compliant and work with council. There'll be ones that may not be able to operate because they could be in flood areas, but there'll certainly be a lot of people that we can work with to ensure safety.
Thank you. Councillor West.
Oh, look, thank you, Chair. Actually, Mark's just answered my question, but I just want to perhaps reiterate that especially up the valleys with all the camping that has started to happen, it's not about the neighbours dobbing these people in, but they are concerned, and they've been concerned, especially a number of adjoining properties, about the water quality and the distance away from creeks that people are camping. So this will be great to have these sorts of things, these matters addressed.
Thank you. Councillor Swanborough.
Thank you. Just a question in relation to compliance. A lot of situations are quite unique, and I don't know if there's a one-size-fits-all compliance policy for everybody. I mean, some people might go at the highest level of safety, some people might go for a medium level, and some people might go for the minimum. I don't know. So the idea of a level playing field is not what I think it's on about. It shouldn't be on about a level playing field. It should be about what is a reasonable standard of safety for all of these operators throughout the whole Shire. Safety's paramount. One person saying, oh, he does this and he should have done it to this standard and not another standard, I just don't think that's a good way of pushing the idea that it's a level playing field that we want. That sort of talks to me about competition. People are concerned about competition, but I'm more concerned about safety, I think.
Thank you. I'll just remind councillors that this is clarifying. I said it. This is questions on the report. So keep the comments about the report and we'll come up with discussion and your thoughts after we've moved the motion. So, GM.
I concur with the sentiment of the Councillor Chair and point councillors to page 49 of this report that clearly outlines the legislation that Council has to adhere to through its regulatory services team that we must enforce, and the requirements thereby that tourist accommodation operators are required to meet that standard. And there's several of them outlined in that document, and it is on a case-by-case basis because not every property is offering the same service, but every property needs to be mindful of the legislative requirements, and also they need to be also very careful that the operations that they are delivering actually are covered under their insurance. And we have found there are a lot of people that are operating thinking they are insured, but in fact the operations are outside of their insurance policy. And I guess that's the piece that we mentioned before about raising awareness and in particular education so that people understand the standards that their property should meet, not necessarily a one-size-fits-all across every property.
Thank you, GM. Any other questions regarding the report? No questions. I ask the GM to present the recommendations, please.
Thank you, Chair. Before you, councillors, for your consideration is our recommendation that 1, Council note the commencement of the Tourist Accommodation Safety Compliance Program for unlawful camping and tourist accommodation which pose a high risk to health, safety and amenity. 2, that Council note the Tourism Accommodation Safety Compliance Program implementation stages outlined in the report, commencing with Stage 1, Communications and Information Strategy. And 3, that council note officers will work with Destination Scenic Room in support and implementation of the safety compliance program.
Thank you, GM. I ask for a mover. Councillor Chalk. Now we can go into discussion. Any discussion, Councillor Swanborough? Councillor McGuinness? Sorry, I can't see your microphone from here if the light's on or not. Okay. No discussion? Okay, ask for a seconder. Councillor West, would you like to speak on your motion, Councillor Chalk?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think this is a good move to implement this. It's a growing risk in our community, especially our rural areas where people are venturing in this space, and they need to be cautious that they are following the rules and that we can protect the rural area for its purpose and the amenity for the people who live there, and also address issues that arise with council, with access and road maintenance and all the things like that are being addressed, and that we can actually keep up to our programs of maintenance when you add all these extra traffic, which happens if you set these sort of things up. So I look forward to seeing the results of this, and I commend council for putting this forward. So thank you.
Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to speak additionally? Councillor West.
Thank you very much. Look, thank you to all the work that's been put into this report. I think this is very timely. And really just to reiterate, it's not only about the safety of visitors, but it is about, as has been mentioned, the safety of our residents who are engaging in these operations and maybe not being totally aware of the insurance side of things, or even maybe have not thought about emergency management and total disaster management, because a lot of these camping grounds are up valleys, which we know flood very readily. So I certainly commend the report.
Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to speak additionally? Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I would endorse those comments made previous, and I think this is a great initiative to address the high risk unapproved activities in the region to ensure a minimum standard for health, safety and amenity is obtained.
Thank you. Councillor Chalk, would you like to give closing remarks?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and we'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Now move on to item 10.5. CEO.
Through you, Mr. Chair. General Manager, please.
Thank you, CEO. Chair, good morning, councillors, executive, advisor, staff, the gallery, both here and online. Item 10.5 deals with an outline of local roads of regional significance and the way in which a road is either considered or otherwise for inclusion on our list of roads that are currently considered local roads of regional significance. I'll draw your attention to, I'll take the report as being read, but I will draw your attention within the report on page 54. There is a list of criteria by which the local roads of regional significance can be assessed. It's really up to the Regional Road and Transport Group to whether all or some of those criteria are addressed. At this point in time, I do know the Regional Roads and Transport Technical Committee, which is a subcommittee of that involves the engineers that look after the roads within the three councils that make up the Scenic Valleys Regional Roads and Transport Group, are working towards a review of that list. So it is timely that this report be presented to council, and I will take any questions.
Councillors, you've all had time to read the report. Are there any questions regarding the report? None. I ask the GM to correction. Councillor McGuinness.
Thanks, Chair. If I could ask the GM, Tivitville Road is not on there, which is up for quite a repair job there at the present time. Is that given it's a fairly major road between Calbar and Burner, I'm surprised it's not on there. Is there a reason that wouldn't be included?
I will certainly take that question on notice. I can only surmise from having been involved in the process for a number of years that because it's an interconnector internally within the region and not providing access outside of the region or as per the criteria there, but certainly when we do the review, we'll certainly look at all of those roads that may fall within the categories that are chosen by the Regional Road and Transport Technical Committee.
And could I ask, Mount Flinders Road, are we responsible for the repair on that rather than Ipswich City?
Mount Flinders Road.
Maybe just take it
I'll
on
take
notice.
that one on notice,
I'm a bit
yes.
surprised. I thought they were responsible for it to their environmental park and so on.
Yes, there is a section of that road that we do have responsibility as a local government.
Yep.
And I can certainly take that on notice because I am aware that there are some agreements, especially with regard to boundary roads within that are shared roads where the boundary of two councils run up the centre line of the road. So I do know that there are separate agreements on how those roads are managed from a maintenance and then a capital investment point of view.
Thank you, CEO. If we can have those two questions on notice noted down as well, thank you. Any other questions on the report? Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Chair. While we're highlighting roads that may or may not be in this, I would just like to raise whether Brooklyn Road would fit under this criteria, and happy for that to be taken on notice.
Yes, I'll take that one on notice as well. I will note within the recommendation that recommendation 2 is that any proposed changes to the register will be brought back to council. I would consider if there are any additional roads that you think need to be reviewed. Certainly our officers will look through the criteria as set by the Regional Roads and Transport Group, but I'm happy to take any further roads that may be considered require a review to whether they meet the criteria or not.
Thank you, GM. If I can ask, if you could just detail the procedure for a road to go from nomination from a councillor or the community through the procedure up to the Roads Alliance.
Thank you for the question. Basically, look, I can go back in history. I'll try and make a very long story short as possible, and which, yes, some smile around the table as I am noted to go into too much detail at times. So realistically, the Road and Transport Alliance was set up in the late 90s, early, and within that there was a group of criteria by which, there were each of the different regional roads and groups were formulated. So for us, we're in with Lockyer Valley, Ipswich City and ourselves, and we meet about once a quarter as a technical group, and then about 3 times a year as a Regional Roads and Transport Group, of which Councillor West is the chair and a member representing council on that group. For a road to actually be included, originally there was a core list of criteria that was picked by the technical committee and then endorsed by the Regional Roads and Transport Group. From my recollection, it does not include all of the criteria listed on page 54. More recently, we've started to question or look at whether the criteria is correct by which the list that we've currently got provided. So the reality of it is we then have to, as part of the process, if a road, and I'll use the example of Hartley Road being put forward, we'll assess that as a technical committee to whether it meets the criteria by which the group has previously agreed on, If it doesn't, is there a need to reassess the criteria? If the criteria is then reassessed, each of the councils will go away and look at their road network and actually see what other roads will actually then could form within that criteria. Criteria gets updated, it gets approved by the Regional Roads and Transport Group in parallel with the review of the rest of the road networks by the three councils. So trying to be fairly tight in my description of what happens, then that recommendation from the technical group would be, I see a parallel agreement between the criteria being updated by which the road network is being assessed and any roads that meet that new criteria.
Thank you very much. I think we're all understand the procedure now. Are there any other questions reference the report? If there are no other questions, I ask the GM to present the recommendation, please.
Thank you, Chair. The recommendation is Council support a review of its register of local roads of regional significance in consultation with the Scenic Valleys Regional Roads and Transport Group. Any proposed changes to Council's register of local roads of regional significance be presented to Council for endorsement, and 3, Hartley Road be considered in the Council's review of its register of local roads of regional significance.
Thank you. I ask for a mover. Councillor Swanborough. Discussion on the item? No discussion. I think it was fairly well covered by the GM. Seconder for the motion, Councillor West. Councillor Swanborough, would you like to speak on the motion?
Yes, I would like to speak on the motion. Yeah, look, this is a body that's set up that has regional input into the significance of local roads. It's appropriate that this body does exist because these roads are highly trafficked and they're important to the economies of all these regions. And I think the criteria that we're operating off, as displayed on the screen, is quite a good criteria. And it does take into consideration high traffic volume areas, and it does take into account tourism and impacts on the local economy, etc. So I support this recommendation and look forward to the review occurring. Thank you.
Thank you. Any councillors speaking against the motion? Any councillors wishing to speak additionally? Councillor West.
Thank you, Chair. Really, just to reiterate, this is really very timely, the fact that the review is occurring right at the moment. It's an annual review of the roads of regional significance, and so it's appropriate that Hartley Road be put into the mix, and obviously some other councillors have roads that they would like to be assessed as well. So I think it's very timely, and I look forward to the report coming back to Council.
Any other councillors wishing to speak? Councillor Swanborough, you wish to close?
I think it's all been said. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We now vote on the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. CEO, if you could introduce item 10.6, please.
Through Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair, I'll go to the General Manager.
Thank you, CEO. Mr. Chair. Item 10.6 deals with an update on the Pig and Calf Sale Heritage Listing Appeal and Court Decision. I'll take the report as being read, but I will highlight a couple of items within the report. One is that officers are still working through finalising the cost of the appeal process. Also, I'd identify that no decision has been made on the actual future of the facility or the site at this stage, and there's no budget allocation to deal with that. And I'd also, in the consultation, that is certainly envisaged that further consultation will occur with the community with regard to options for the site moving forward. I'm happy to take any questions from there.
Thank you, GM. Any questions on the report? Councillor Swanborough.
Just in relation to that new consultation you've announced, Will that be a broad consultation, or is it narrowed in some way to the existing plans, or just what is it going to look like?
At this stage, not fully aware of what that may mean or be. Realistically, the current stages of the Bay Desert Town Centre revitalisation don't deal with that specific site. The timing and the scope of which any future works at that location are yet to be determined, and really I'm not in a position to answer that with a full without the full understanding of what may be the options that we certainly look at for that site moving forward.
In relation to the comments that there are no plans for the site at this point in time, I understand the original plans were that there was going to be a trailer parking place where the sale yards are. Have those plans been changed?
In the higher level overall position of the way in which the layout of the extension to the car park that currently is being constructed or almost completed at the site, that yes, that was certainly an overlay that would be a potential moving forward. But at this point in time, that's an unfunded project, and given what has transpired over the 3 years since that original concept plan was put in place, I believe it appropriate that further consideration be given to that higher level concept of what that area would be used for, be appropriate.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Swanborough?
Yes. I think the public could be a little bit confused about this at the moment. Are we giving them hope that the pig and calf sale yard may one day be restored to its original use?
I'm not in a position to actually answer what the options may be. If you want and I guess you're looking at my professional opinion, there is quite a considerable amount of work required if it was to certainly become a sale yard facility into the future. A detailed report will be provided in future around the various options, and one of the options would certainly be looking at that as a continuation of what is there. But look, I'm not going to sit here today and say that by any means is giving hope to anybody that would actually be the use moving forward.
Thank you. Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder if it's worth clarifying whether this report is actually about the future of the sale yards or the actual heritage listing appeal and the court decision.
It is more around an update with regard to the heritage listing decision.
Thank you. Any other questions? If no questions, ask the GM to present the recommendations, please.
Thank you, Chair. Other recommendation is that Council acknowledge the judgment by Her Honour Judge Kefford ordering that the decision of the Queensland Heritage Council to enter the Bay Desert Pig and Calf Sale Yard on the Queensland Heritage Register as a state heritage place be set aside and replaced with a decision not to enter the Bay Desert Pig and Calf Sale Yard on the Queensland Heritage Register. And two, Council acknowledge that further consideration is required to ascertain the future of the Bay Desert Pig and Calf Sale Yard site.
Thank you. Mover for the motion, Councillor Enright. Discussion. Are there any discussion around the table? No discussion. The seconder for the motion, please. Councillor McGuinness. Councillor Enright, you wish to speak on your motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move an amendment to the motion.
Let's hear your amendment.
The amendment is that in recommendation number 2, that the word consideration be deleted and the word consultation be inserted.
Just waiting for the wording to be finished. So we can all see the wording up on the... Would you like to speak on your recommendation?
Through you, Chair, if I may ask whether that changes the intent significantly of the original motion.
I'll just ask the CEO.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I might just go back to the General Manager. Again, it needs to come back to the move of the motion to consider any sort of amendment.
Thank you, CEO and Chair. I would believe consideration would include consultation, if required.
Look, you clearly said in that the community was going to be consulted again. I would suggest that the word consideration doesn't necessarily mean consultation. Consultation probably means consideration, but I think consultation is a more clearer word if in fact that's what we're going to intend to do, if we are going to go out to consultation on this again.
Through you, Chair, if I could ask Councillor Swanborough whether he would consider in the amendment that the words consideration remain in there and community consultation be added.
Councillor Swanborough?
Look, I think the original amendment has more clarity than that, so I would say no.
Councillor McInnes?
Yep. Thanks, Chair. I just wonder if the GM could outline what consultation had been taken up until this point of time.
The current consultation went back to the original community consultation around both the centres of Beaudesert and Tambourine Mountain at Main Street, as well as Boona, with the work that was done back in 2015-16. There's quite a bit of feedback provided. From that, council officers pulled together a concept plan for each of those three sites. Within that, there was certainly identification of various stages of projects within, and I'll speak more specifically to Beaudesert Town Centre. And look, the first 5 stages of those had a detailed design. Within that original plan, there was no particular consideration of other than a square patch in a slightly different shaded colour for where the current facility, which was the pig and calf sale yard facility up until a year or so ago. There was certainly a community feedback provided through various means. We also, officers set up a one-stop shop across from the council facility that we had numerous members of the community walk in and make comment about the overall project, but not specifically that site. So the reality of it is that the consultation was around the whole project, or the 5 stages of the project, which didn't have a specific bent to one way or another with regard to that particular element of the town centre revitalisation future projects. Hopefully that
Thank you,
broadly answers your question.
Yeah, it does. If you have a look on page 59 of the report, the last paragraph actually states here, a further report is to be presented to Council providing an update on costs incurred to date as well as future options for this site. It's envisaged this report will be presented within a 3-month time frame. Okay. Can we have a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor McGuinness. Councillor Swanborough, you wish to speak on your amendment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This would be a very welcome development in this whole episode of the pig and calf sale yards. The history of this is it's created, the future use of this facility has created major angst in the community and major loss of the heritage and the community spirit that used to generate amongst the farming community and the old timers who've used this facility for, it's debatable whether it's 60 or 120 years. I'm not quite sure of the answer to that. But the car park has been constructed. The process is underway. The facility still stands, and it still could be brought up to a standard to, once again, do pig and calf sale yards. There are other options that could occur. It could be a new tourist attraction for the area to show how these pig and calf sale yards worked in a rural town. I think that if we're at this particular point in time now, I think it would be very wise for us to go out and listen to the community again. And that's why I'm proposing we change the word consideration, which is more broadly, and it doesn't say who's going to consider it or how the decision's going to be made. But we know if we use the word consultation, you know, we have the IAPT spectrum of what that means, and we understand that the community at least will be listened to and have the opportunity to have their input under our communication policy.
Thank you. Anyone speaking against the amendment? Anyone wishing to speak additionally? You wish to close, Councillor Swanborough?
No, I think I've said it all. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now vote. All those in favour of the amendment? That is unanimous. Just waiting for catch up. Thank you. GM, if you could just read out the second paragraph that has been changed for the amendment, just so we can clarify.
Thank you, Chair. The second paragraph that has now been amended in the motion is Council acknowledged that further consultation is required to ascertain the future of the Desert Pig and Calf Sale Yard site.
Thank you. Councillor Enright, you wish to speak on the motion?
Thank you, Chair, I do. I acknowledge that the Desert Pig and Calf Sale Yards has been divisive and an emotive issue in our district. Unfortunately, it now appears that much of the information that stirred such emotion was incorrect. As stated in the judgment, the sale yard structure has been a place of business and transactions since the early 1960s, not the 100+ years that some would have us believe. This decision to reverse the listing of the Desert Pig and Calf Sale Yards in the Queensland Heritage Register is an outcome based on fact rather than emotion and hearsay. The clear and precise process that Her Honour Judge Kefford provided delved beyond the emotive and questionable information submitted in the heritage application and re-examined each of the criteria for cultural heritage significance. Interestingly, the National Trust of Queensland did not support the entry of the site in the Queensland Heritage Register, as the place did not meet the thresholds or criteria for cultural significance as a state heritage place. As Her Honour Judge Kefford outlined in her conclusion, I am satisfied that the sale yard does not satisfy any of the criterion for cultural heritage significance. In those circumstances, it is not appropriate for it to remain listed. I fully support this motion and look forward to further consideration into the future of the Big Calf sale yard site.
Is that consideration or consultation?
Thank you. Those wishing to speak against the motion? Councillor Swanborough?
No.
Okay, sorry, you had your light on, so I thought. Anyone wishing to speak additionally? Councillor Enright, you wish to close?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, now go to a vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. As it's now 10:30,
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think we have a response in relation to the question on notice in relation to the waiving of the infrastructure rates. General Manager.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. CEO, I took the question this morning to be querying the type of structure of the two different organisations, and I thank Oliver for doing some quick research for me on behalf of the team. The difference between Wangabara and the Church of Christ, which was the owner of the Harrisville facility, when considered previously, they're both considered not-for-profit organisations, and noting that the Church of Christ was given that previous waiver of 25% capped at $50,000. Research of the organisational structures, though, indicates the differentiation between Wangabara is that it is listed as a public benevolent institution and the Church of Christ is listed as a charity. In the definitions that I will provide to Council, too detailed to describe here, but the PBI provides for greater concessions given the nature and purpose of organisations that are eligible for that. And I acknowledge it at the time than it does as a charitable organisation. Recognised by the ATO and by the Commonwealth Government. And at the time when Council decided the Harrisville site, there was a discussion about the owner organisation, its structure, scale and sources of funding. As stated earlier, these requests are assessed on a case-by-case basis, taking into consideration those organisations, its structures, and then presented to Council for consideration. And if the councillor is happy, I would consider that that notice of motion has been responded to and is closed. The question notice, pardon me, is closed.
Councillor McInnes, you happy with that response?
No, I'm not, because it's incorrect. With all due respect to the GM, it's actually the Wesley Mission that have the Harrisville site. Church of Christ, I think, was the one in Boona,
yes,
where there was a. And I forget, we did give some discount, but only maybe it was 25% there too.
So what I can say, thank you, Councillor. The Wesley is listed as a charity, as the same charitable type as the Church of Christ.
Are you happy with that response?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. That's okay. Thank you. We'll now consider that one closed. We now move on to item 11, our confidential matters. We have two confidential items in closed session under section 254J3E. I will seek a motion to move into closed session. I will ask that the motion be read out for the members of the public. So I will read it out. Council resolved into closed session in accordance with Council's meetings and other forums procedure relating to closed council meetings and the provisions of section 254J3 of the Local Government Regulation 2012 to discuss confidential items relating to E. Legal advice obtained by the local government or legal proceedings involving the local government, including, for example, legal proceedings that may be taken by or against the local government. Can I have a mover for the motion? Councillor West. Second, discussion.
Yes, I'd like to move an amendment to that particular motion, that my notice of motion proposed to the Chief Executive Officer be read out so that the public will be informed about what the debate is in relation to this issue.
Is your notice of motion not listed?
No, my notice of motion has not been listed.
It's in confidential.
Yeah, I'm saying that my notice of motion that's in confidential for this particular item be read out prior to going into confidential for discussion.
Just wait.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the councillor officers have already undertaken an assessment and recommended it be placed in confidential. If the councillor wants to have this taken out of confidential, there's a process to do that.
Yeah, that's the process, and I'm actually doing that process now to see if it can be taken out. Only that section, only that particular statement, because as it stands at the moment, it is not clear why we are going into confidential session, and I believe that my notice of motion does not breach any legal advice or anything. It's just a question of yes or no. Do we continue the legal action or do we stop the legal action? So that's what this was all about.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, as council has indicated, this is a discussion about legal services, and that's why the recommendation is there from the officers for confidential.
Do you wish to continue?
I do wish to put it to a vote, Mr. Mayor. This is my notice of motion did not propose any discussion on the legalities or legal advice or anything else. My notice of motion merely asks that certain actions be stopped immediately which affected a community organisation and a member of the public. And it was a simple yes or no, tick this box or cross that box. It was nothing more or less.
Just wait. Your notice of motion will come out after we've had the discussion.
That's
So
good.
we'll
Well, everybody can vote for my amendment. Well, is that correct?
No, but what I'm saying is your notice of motion will be out after we've been in confidential.
That needs to be a decision of the council, I believe.
Yeah, I'm just informing you that we're going to read that out after we've been in confidential and we've discussed it, but you want it read out before. So your amendment is basically mute because we are going to bring it out just after we come back.
There's a potential to change your mind if during this process. So I would prefer, if that is the case and that is the intention, that it be noted at this point in time.
Okay. Thank you. So we will remain with the motion. So a mover? No, he's withdrawn. He's withdrawn his amendment. Correct. Oh, who did we move? Councillor West, yes. So seconder? Councillor Chalk? Let's vote on the matter. All those in favour? That's unanimous. We'll now move into closed session. The time is now 10:40 hours. The time is now 10:40. We will adjourn and we'll be back on the half hour. So either at the high or the low of the hour, we will return. For your attendance this morning, and hopefully we won't be too long. Okay, welcome back to our digital gallery and our gallery in here. Can I please get a motion to move back into open? Councillor West. Seconder, Councillor Chalk. All those in favour? Pass unanimously. Now move on to item 11.1, CEO.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll go to the General Manager.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, CEO. Before I present my recommendation, I need to correct an error in item 4 of the recommendation I have before you, and I've asked for some additional words to be added and for item 4 to be updated. Do you wish me to read those now before I present the full recommendation? I'm asking for item 4 to have these following adjustments.
Yep, Harry.
Thank you. I've asked for the adjustment to item 4 to now read that pursuant to clause 22.6.3 of the Scenic Rim Regional Council Standing Orders Procedure CM03.01.PR.01, confidentiality be maintained and that the report on this matter and attachments not be released to the public until the conclusion of the process with co-respondents regarding the cost orders. So I'll now read the full recommendation.
Thank you.
Before you, councillors, for your consideration is a recommendation that 1, that council note the judgment MCU 20/050 SDA Properties Nominees Proprietary Limited versus Scenic Rim Regional Council and Oars Planning and Environment Court Appeal number BD 2001 of 2021, 1 to 11 Eagles Retreat Place, Tamborine Mountain, and finalisation matter including conditions imposed on the development approval. 2, that council notes the judgment comments that the co-respondents' persistence with their refusal cases resulted in a waste of public and private resources, and that council has incurred significant costs to be represented at the hearing and the actions to date in recovery of costs. 3, that council note that should the co-respondent seek an alternative agreement, this matter will be referred to council for consideration. And 4, pursuant to clause 22.6.3 of the Scenic Rim Regional Council Standing Orders Procedure CM03.01.PR.01, confidentiality be maintained and that the report on this matter and attachments not be released to the public until the conclusion of the process with the co-respondents regarding the cost orders.
Thank you. Mover for the motion, Councillor Enright. Seconder, Councillor McGuinness. We'll now vote on the motion. All those in favour? Wait. Yeah. Okay. We'll go back. Councillor Enright, would you like to speak on the motion?
Thank you, Chair. Look, I think while this is not an easy decision, I think it's important that we are following due process, and I think draw particular reference to the comment by Judge Williamson that the co-respondent's input into the appeal resulted in a waste of public and private resources. That waste was unnecessary and avoidable.
Speaker against the motion?
Yes, I'll speak against the motion. I mean, this is the first thing that I don't like in this. I agree with the original motion. I believe in the interest of transparency, when something is of just high public interest, I think it's best. I mean, we know that we have a customer service policy that says, you know, that we're going to be open and honest always, etc., etc. And I think we should have been informing the public of where we're at to with this particular thing. And so I don't think we should be holding back this report. I agree with the original officer's recommendation. Also, I don't agree. There is a lot more that to this particular issue than we can discuss here in open council, and there's two sides to the story. and I believe that it's the costs issue is a wrong one, and my notice of motion that comes up in the next item on the agenda, we'll discuss that further. Thank you. I'll be voting against this motion.
Speaker for the motion? Anyone else wishing to speak on the motion? No, we'll now take a vote. All those in favour? All those against? It's carried. The division is called by Councillor Swanborough. The division is Divisions 3, 4, 5, 6 and the Acting Mayor against Division 1. Just waiting for the... You good? Okay. CEO, item 11.2.
Through Mr. Mayor, damn it. Through you, Chair, I'll hand over to the General Manager.
Thank you, CEO and Chair. Item 11.2 is a notice of motion by Councillor Swanborough regarding the recovery of costs for the MCU 20/050 SDA Property Nominees Proprietary Limited versus Scenic Rim Regional Council and Oars. Planning and Environment Court Appeal number BD 2001 of 2021 for the 1 to 11 Eagles Retreat Place, Tamborine Mountain. The CEO was in receipt of a notice of motion presented from the councillor. It was a written notice of motion advising of the intention to propose a motion in relation to the recovery of the court costs from the Tamborine Mountain Progress Association and Miss Amanda Hay in the matter MCU 20/050, as I just stated. I have nothing further to add.
Thank you, GM. Councillor Swanborough, would you like to present your
Yes,
notice
if
of motion?
the minutes clerk could bring up the notice of motion. I'll read the notice of motion. That in view of high community concern and the hardship to be caused on the 107-year-old Tamborine Mountain Progress Association and long-standing volunteer and community member Amanda Hay, that Council take no further action in relation to the costs order to recover court costs from the Tamborine Mountain Progress Association and Mrs. Amanda Hay, handed down on the 9th of December 2022 by His Honour Judge Williamson and lodged in the court by Scenic Rim Council and the appellant. Amanda Hay and the Progress Association were co-respondents by election in relation to the P&E Court Appeal, Eagles Retreat SRRC MCU 20050, and worked tirelessly at their own expense for over 12 months with counsel to oppose the application, which was a deemed refusal, and highly opposed in the community. Both co-respondents have continued to work on the case and have, by their own initiative, successfully negotiated conditions on the developer to mitigate the impacts of the development, for which the community is grateful.
You moving that?
I move that motion.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconder, Councillor Chalk. Councillor Swanborough, would you like to speak on your motion?
Well, there's only limited things I can say. It's been considered in confidential briefing, but what I can say is the words that are there, because they're in public, and I think they're pretty well self-explanatory. I think that it's a false economy for council to do this. I don't believe council's been consistent. Over the years, there have been many times in the past where developers have been scathingly criticised by a judge, and council has not pursued the recovery of costs in those circumstances. And I think that This is a false economy because it has the potential to create a division in the community, and I think the small amount of money that's likely to be recovered will be totally lost in loss of reputation for the council. So that's why I put this motion forward.
Thank you. Speaker against the motion? Anyone wishing? Correction, Councillor West.
Sorry, Chair. Look, just noting item 11.1, this has just gone before us. Point 3 there says that the co-respondents are able to seek an alternative agreement, which will then come back to us as a council for further discussion. So I am not able to support the motion the way it is at the moment.
A speaker for the motion? Anyone wishing to speak additionally to the motion? No, we'll now take a vote. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? Division is called. Motion is lost. The division is called by Councillor Swanborough. For the motion, Division 1. Against the motion, Divisions 3, 4, 5, 6, and the acting mayor. That brings us to the end of our ordinary meeting for the 7th of February 2023. I'd like to thank our gallery for sitting through the morning and only having to do 3.5 hours. And especially those listening in the digital gallery. I look forward to the next meeting where the Mayor will be back. So thank you very much, and we will see you later.